Thank you. Let me make a comment as it relates, again, to Title I and Title III, and then I'd like to focus on Title II. I think we've rehashed a lot of what's transpired over the last 20 years, but just as an observation, and there are many other points, but we talked earlier about CVPIA reform and B2. I remember in a conversation that I had with then Undersecretary Garamendi back in 1997, and it's just a fundamental difference. The 800,000 acre feet of water that was allocated under B2, we always viewed as a ceiling. And he made it very clear to me that he always viewed it as a floor. And with a ceiling of 800,000 acre feet, we were willing to comply with our agreement. And we even further stipulated that we would set up a separate environmental water account. But the difference is that people would buy the water. We'd have to justify a reason to purchase the water for the environmental purposes. And that just basically is the heart of so many fundamental differences there as to who shares the sacrifice and who ends up paying. Now, as it relates to Title II, Mr. Connor, we've provided initial money. We know the history of that 6 years ago, the negotiation settlement that Mr. Upton referred to, the codification that occurred 2 years later. We have a sum total of a little over $300 million available. I'm very concerned in light of the budget difficulties we have now that the additional $500 million for up to fiscal year 2018 will not be available. Have you thought about this? Today, the Subcommittee on Appropriations zeroed out the funding for the restoration on the San Joaquin River.
Thank you, Congressman Costa. We have thought a lot about the funding for San Joaquin River restoration. As you point out, the restructuring of the contracts in the Front Division have brought in already about $174 million, I think, and we're expecting $227 million.
No, I know, but to the point, we know what the numbers are. I've got the sheet here. We can pass it out. I'm just saying, what if that's the only amount of money available left?
Well, I think it's not. We obviously have a different perspective in the administration from the Appropriations Committee. We have added money in our 2011 spending plan, $5 million. We've added money to our 2012 budget, $9 million. We have the $88 million mandatory funds.
The point, Mr. Connor, is and I understand, you're implementing the law. You're doing the best
Absolutely.
You can, and I don't argue that point. But we have to look at the budget for the entire country, and we're going to have to make cuts across the board in every other area. And I'm just saying, as I indicated in my opening statement, 5 years later, and Mr. Lair, you know the state of California has its own budget difficulties. When we're trying to weigh funding health care, when we're trying to weigh funding other critical issues, and we're talking about beyond the money from the restoration fund that the water users are paying, beyond the $100 million the state's committed, beyond the money that the federal government has already appropriated, where is that other $500? I think those are going to be tough questions. It won't be your responsibility, Mr. Connor, because you're simply to implement what is appropriated and to do forth. But the rest of us have to make the tough decisions. And I'm saying that I could foresee a condition in which the additional money will not be there. How do you plan to go forth? Have you thought about it?
We're looking at our budgets right now. We're trying to get up to that level so we can ensure implementation. Part of it will be looking at the schedule also. In that $500 million.
You agree when I raised the issue back in February that the current schedule has to be recalibrated?
We are having those discussions with the parties as we speak.
Let me ask you this here. Is there any, I made the point in my opening statement, but is there any funding available for third parties under existing law for mitigation or for reimbursement?
We are looking at the authority issue right now for mitigation and reimbursement.
But there's no money in the existing law, right?
Well, we are looking at using the money for the program should we have the authority to do that. If
Is there anything in this legislation that would provide money for?
It repeals the settlement.
Right. So
there's nothing.
Right. Okay. And that's a problem in this existing proposal. Mr. Lair, finally, my last question to you. Has the state looked, given your hard, difficult financial circumstances, what might be happening in the future as we go forward if there is only the existing amount of money that's been appropriated at the state, federal, and the local restoration funds? Have you looked at under those circumstances?
We haven't. We have just looked at...
I would suggest...
Well, we looked at doing our part, and the bonds have actually been sold, and the $100 million is in the bank. We've spent some of it for both the EIS and the on-the-ground studies, and we're committed to continue with our part.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired, but I do think that this is an area that, out of the budget realities that we're all dealing with at the federal and state level, we're going to have to look at.
No question.